Good morning, TEDxTulane. I'm thrilled to be part of this exciting exchange of ideas, and I am especially grateful that you want to learn more about what I believe is one of the keys to progress as we look to the future, and that is computer code. Applying computer programming language to data can spark important conversations around some of our biggest problems, and machine learning can help us harness big data to learn more about our society. Without a doubt, we live in a world that is increasingly digitized and globalized, and the amount of raw data that is accessible to the general public is rapidly growing. In fact, the quantity is quite staggering. To understand it, let's use this analysis. Consider the numbers 1 million, 1 billion, and 1 trillion and their relation to time. We know that 1 million seconds is equal to about 12 days, but how long do you think 1 billion seconds is? The answer is about 31.7 years. If we continue this example, we can also ask ourselves, how long is 1 trillion seconds? 1 trillion seconds equates to about 31,688 years. But we hear these numbers all the time. When we talk about economics, world population, space, it is only when we think about them closely and in comparison to each other that their meaning and magnitude starts to come into focus. The same can be said for understanding how much raw data is available. The quantity is so immense that it can be hard to conceptualize. We can use our understanding of 1 million, 1 billion, and 1 trillion from our recent example to think about how much data exists. The average photo you take with your smartphone is anywhere from 1 to 5 megabytes, and 1,000 megabytes is 1 gigabyte. We've all become accustomed to gigabytes. Before mobile plans became unlimited, you could get a plan of 10 gigabytes or perhaps a family plan of 20 gigabytes before being charged for additional data. Our phones usually have storage capacity of 32, 64, 128 gigabytes, and so on. Recall 1 trillion seconds equals 32 years. Well, 1 trillion gigabytes is a zettabyte, and there are nearly 60 zettabytes of data that exist throughout our world today. The market research company International Data Corporation recently published that 59 zettabytes exist in the global data sphere. The global data sphere is defined as the amount of data created, captured, and replicated in any given year across the world. That is an incredible amount of information that can be mined and analyzed for important connections and patterns. But in the face of that sheer volume of information, how can we dig through the seemingly unassociated variables to find the connections and patterns that can be the foundations for positive change? Data mining tools applied through code are an effective way to analyze this data. Today, we will consider how we can capitalize on the information in the global data sphere for social good. My personal experience with data mining began when I had the opportunity to assist Dr. Cecilia Alcala in her research. Her work analyzes information gathered by the Caribbean Consortium for Environmental and Occupational Health for possible correlation between environmental factors and human health. Her sample population was from the Republic of Suriname, a country on the northeastern Atlantic coast of South America. The research included analyzing hundreds of urine samples of pregnant Surinamese women for concentrations of pesticide metabolites. Metabolites are the trace compounds left behind after our bodies process substances. When exposed to pesticides, the compounds produced contain chemicals we can detect and identify. These concentrations were coded, graphed, and visualized, and they gave us the possible insight as to whether or not pesticides were being used for agricultural purposes or residential use. They also gave us the intel as to the level of pesticides being used in general, and gave way to the primary reason Surinamian women were being exposed to these harmful chemicals during their pregnancies. These sorts of facts can be foundations for change. When data can be cleaned, mined, and visualized, it can catalyze change in public policy, environmental regulations, and workers' rights. Applying code to raw data gives us the ability to gauge the effectiveness of public policy. There are a multitude of coding programs that can be used for such work. My personal experience is primarily in R, but languages such as Python, Java, C++ also have high utility in the field of data mining. In addition to revealing hidden connections between variables, two of the biggest benefits of applying code to raw data are visualization and access. In the area of visualization, code can help turn volumes of raw data into graphs and diagrams that make the information much easier to interpret. For instance, R is a variety of packages that can accomplish this. Packages are collections of functions and data sets that can be imported into the coding system. Here are a few ways in which R has been used to create dynamic visuals that make data easier to understand. All three of these graphs were created with the package ggplot2 and only took a few lines of code to generate. Graph 1 was generated with just 3 lines of code, since R is equipped with open source packages that allow us to quickly and efficiently visualize data sets. Not only can packages be downloaded to create visuals, they can also be used to access information and easily import large data sets. For example, the package rnhanes allows the importation of all of the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey data conducted by the Centers for Disease Control, with just a single line of code that reads install.packages rnhanes. Take a moment to contemplate that. With just a few lines of code, a programmer can access studies that assess the health and nutritional status of thousands of adults and children in the United States. It includes demographic, socioeconomic, dietary, and health-related information, but the potential for analysis is staggering. Now, let's circle back to the analysis of the pregnant woman in Suriname. It's important to remember that those connections discovered in Suriname represent real people and real health impacts. But we don't need to look so far away for an example of how data can be used as a tool for change. It's also been put to use in our own backyard, so to speak, this time to impact public safety. Certain populations are more susceptible to injury and death when there is a fire. Children, the elderly, and those with limited mobility are the most at risk during a fire in the home. Right here in New Orleans, data has been examined and visualized to help mitigate home fire casualties. The city of New Orleans wondered how data could be mined to assist its most vulnerable citizens. In 2016, the New Orleans Office of Performance and Accountability developed a model using data from the U.S. Census Bureau's American Housing Survey and American Community Survey to do just that. The city identified variables that might correlate to whether a residence was likely to have a smoke alarm. These included the age of the structure, the length of tenancy, and whether there were additions to the property. These variables were then applied to census data and other historical records to identify with high-risk factors and the likelihood of no smoke detector. The analysis of these variables resulted in a map of the city that highlighted where residents were at greater risk for home fire death. Using that data, the city went door to door with free smoke alarms. That free service was always available, but it was up to the resident to seek it out. The combination of data, code, and civic duty allowed officials to bring potential life-saving devices to those who may have needed it most. This geospatial model was so successful, it was adapted at the national level and replicated in cities such as New York and Chicago. So far, we have talked about how code and data can be combined to discover connections, visualize findings, and integrate data. It can also be used for machine learning. Machine learning is a branch of artificial intelligence that uses algorithms and statistical models to analyze and draw inferences between patterns in data. These systems improve through experience, essentially learning while doing. There are many analogies that help clarify what machine learning accomplishes and how it works. The one that makes the most sense to me is to think of machine learning algorithms as math students. Imagine that they've been given hundreds of homework problems, but instead of just being asked to solve for the answer to each and move on, they are also asked to find the patterns in the solutions that they can so that they can do the work more efficiently. The intersection of big data, code, and machine learning has proved to be useful in the hospital setting. In-hospital cardiac arrests typically trigger what is called a code blue, an urgent medical emergency usually involving respiratory distress. Currently, code blues have a 20% survival rate. In attempts to increase the positive outcomes, researchers were able to write a code for a machine learning system to predict a code blue hours before it occurs. The model was trained with data from electronic medical records and vital signs during the course of a hospital stay. The data that was used to train the algorithm included 29 different vitals and lab results. Some examples of vital signs used were respiratory rate, systolic and diastolic blood pressures, pulse oximetry, and temperature. And the lab tests included hemoglobin, platelet count, hematocrit, creatinine, and sodium levels. The machine learning algorithm was able to predict a potential code blue as many as 4 hours before a potential occurrence. The essence of this model is that we can use our data on vital signs in combination with machine learning to improve code blue outcomes and ultimately improve patient outcomes. Machine learning has also been used to expose potential corruption and inequity. Consider the recent study, using machine learning to help vulnerable tenants in New York City. To help keep housing affordable, the City of New York uses rent stabilization policies to restrict the rate at which the rent of units may be increased annually. There are cases in which landlords will attempt to evade these laws. A machine learning model was implemented to identify units that landlords might target for harassment. The study framed the tenant harassment risk prediction as a binary classification problem by trying to predict if there will be any cases of harassment in a given time frame of 1 month. Data was combined from different sources in efforts to identify variables that signal possible landlord harassment. Some of the variables chosen included whether or not a knock was answered at the door, income of the tenants, age distributions of the tenants, renovation history of the building, and code violations of the building. Using this model, the city's tenant support unit was able to identify at-risk units with 59% more accuracy. Like our subjects in Suriname, making these connections results in real impacts on the human experience. Those occupants are potentially more housing secure because of computer code and the public servants who employed it. Part of the reason why such an enormous amount of data exists is because of something we call data exhaust. Data exhaust can be thought of as the trail of data we leave behind as we use the internet. Every time you like an Instagram picture, download a PDF, or reply to a tweet, you're creating a piece of data. This data exhaust can be harnessed for social good in the fight against cyberbullying and cyber aggression. In 2018, a machine learning system was trained with millions of tweets with the goal of distinguishing users that are bullies and aggressors. Tweets were analyzed on a variety of factors, such as crowdsourced identification of abusive keywords, the use of curse words, and user and account-based attributes, such as number of tweets, followers, and account age. The use of hate-related words seems like easy evidence of cyberbully behavior. However, the machine learning algorithm also gave insight to the semantic patterns of cyberbullies. It was discovered that users classified as cyberbullies use a lower number of adjectives and adverbs compared to normal users, and that aggressive users post tweets with higher number of words per tweet compared to normal users. The algorithm was ultimately able to identify cyberbullies and cyber-aggressors with over 90% accuracy. Machine learning may prove to be a critical component in the efforts to make the cybersphere a more respectful and safer space. While protecting free speech should always be a core value in our democratic society, machine learning may help create a system that can help to identify users who violate important terms of use and potentially suspend accounts of those who are frequent offenders. Often, when we hear references to data, it is in the context of concern. Are our rights to privacy being overlooked, or worse, purposefully disregarded? Are companies using available data to manipulate consumers or twist systems in their favor? These are certainly valid concerns. But we need to make sure that we also recognize that the data sphere can be mined for good. Computer code and machine learning can be used to find connections to help us identify problems and critically think about solutions. Public safety, healthcare, the environment, internet safety, these and so many more areas are all on the table and ready for analysis. So the key is this. As the global data sphere continues to grow exponentially, let's think about ways we can harness this data to learn more about our society and ultimately code solutions to some of humanity's greatest challenges. The connections are there, waiting to be discovered. And through code, we have the power to find them. Thank you.